Okay, so we are live. I'm Lisa Kastner, and you are here with me, the founder and executive editor of Running Wild and RIZE. And I'm here with two of our amazing editors, Peter Wright, who is also one of our acquisition editors, and Cody Cisco, who, by the way, Cody, I didn't tell you this yet. People are now asking for you by name.
Who's asking? My ears are burning.
We have a woman who she wrote a memoir that's part poetry and part narrative.
Oh, interesting.
And she was like, am I allowed to pick my own editor? And I was like, well, it doesn't really work that way. I mean, you can request somebody, and so she asked for you.
Fascinating. Yeah. Let's talk about that sometime. Maybe not on camera.
Yeah. Right, exactly. She's awesome. So I'll give you the scoop later, but that literally happened. I think it was like at 8:00 this morning.
Very
So
cool.
yeah, I just thought that was really interesting. I mean, people ask for Peter as well. No one asks for me. It's like they just message me and say, when are you going to accept my work? Okay.
Well, you know what? The secret's maybe everyone needs to be nicer to Lisa.
That's hilarious. That may be. I don't know. Hi, Mohammed. Lovely to see you. So a couple, we were actually last week when everything exploded. And that was really interesting. So Peter and I were going to talk about the new acquisition process a little bit. So for those who are watching or who are watching in the future, basically what we've done is we go through everything that we have in our submittable. So if you're sending something directly to one of our editors, it's not going to get considered, just as a heads up. You really want to put it into our submittable. And honestly, the main reason for that is it's going to get lost in our email. I mean, that's just the reality. We all get so much email. It's kind of ridiculous, actually. So we go through everything in submittable. We identify those that we think are maybes, probably yeses, and like absolute no's. And those that are maybes and most likely yeses, we then download them. And if we need any additional information from the author, we ask the author for, it might be a summary, it could be a log line, it could be additional background on the author, him or herself. And then, we sit down with all of our acquisition editors, with the head of licensing, and also with our agent. So believe it or not, we have an agent that actually represents, as long as you allow it, it actually represents all of our authors as well. So we go through and we whittle it down. So we start off with something insane like 800, and then got down to about 107, and now we're down to, Peter, what was it, like 30 or something like that?
30 sounds right.
Yeah. And
in terms of
so then from there we just basically say, okay, what ones do we want to publish in 2023? What do we want to publish in 2024? And then what ones do we think, maybe we'll keep into consideration for the future? So we are at the very tail end of that process now. Everyone who participated in the process, they have a deadline of Friday in order to let me know what ones they want in 2023 and 2024, and what ones might be, further out. And then I am going to be spending part of this weekend and next week, most likely, notifying everyone who made that list. So if you don't hear from us, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're not being considered. What it probably means is that we received your submission after we had started this process, and so we'll most likely include it as a part of the next, because we're going to be doing this every quarter. So you want to hold tight. It's all good. You don't have to wait years, just months, and we'll be going through it. If you send us something that's specifically for an anthology, so it could be for a novella anthology, a short story anthology, those are two big ones actually, then we actually typically, whoever the editor is for it will typically then select a specific period in time in order to go through all the submissions associated with whether it's a short story or a novella, and then let us know that what ones will go, what ones we won't be picking up, and so on. That's basically the core of it. I don't know, Peter, do you want to add to the like how we did it and what we did?
Sure, I'd love to. The neat thing about it, from my point of view, is that instead of being by yourself on a computer going through stories and trying to figure out what would Ben like, what would Joelle like, kind of thing, what do I like? We're all in the same quote unquote room, and we're able to hear each other's opinions. Okay, we like this one. Why do you like that one? Oh, well, the plot sounds good. And I'm like, but the writing could use a little help. Okay, so it's a yes, maybe. So on different factors, it goes from a solid no to a yes maybe. So we get to all hear everybody's opinions on every story, and we discuss. Like, okay, well, I think this one has merit, or I think this one doesn't have merit. But if you do, we'll go with that. We'll call it a maybe, and then we'll go through the secondary process that we're doing. Shoot, that I got to do tonight to be done by tomorrow. So it's a great process. I thought it was really helpful, really positive having that many people join in the fray as it was.
And what was actually pretty huge was the fact that everyone felt comfortable. And what I mean by that is it would be so easy to blow it off, right? And to say, you know what? I don't care what you say. Yeah, sure, you love that. Kiss my ass. All good. And yes, I just said the A word.
You talked to Ben then, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Ben and I are like this. And I think that's important in the fact that we feel comfortable in being very open with one another in terms of why we like a piece, why we don't like a piece. And actually, Cody has been integral in this process as well. We had a book that we eventually did purchase, and originally everyone was torn. Like, some people were like, I like it, but I'm not sure. Others were like, I'm not sure I quite get it. And Cody read it and said, you know what? I think that this could be huge. So let's get together with the author. And it was Cody's guidance that really kind of helped that author not just flourish, but I want to say thrive. I don't know, Cody, do you want to talk a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, we're talking about Mike's book. Yeah. I think I maybe mentioned this before at one of our earlier Ask Me Anythings, but people might not remember, or maybe weren't here. So the manuscript came in at I think around 60,000 words, and it was a really compelling historical fiction novel that was set in the early 2000s in Memphis, and the main character is a young gay man with OCD who believes he's been infected with HIV via a rape. And so very strong premise, heightened stakes, really good world building, all of that, and flowing through all the way to the end. 100% the story was there, but it really just needed some elaboration in the first third to kind of set the stakes, and a little more build out of some of the relationships between characters. And so, the potential was there, but it was a question I think that we went back and forth on, Lisa, of like, well, how much, do we want to get involved with the writers when the stories, maybe needs a little bit more, more work, not just editing, but actually writing new scenes, which is potentially a lot to get into in the process. But like we talked with the author, Michael Kiggins, he was on board, you were on board, I was too, and we are just like, all right, well, let's do this. And the timeline for something like that can stretch out a bit, but we got there about a month or so ago, and I'm so much looking forward to seeing this come out, because it's a I don't think it's like much of what anyone else has read before.
I'm really excited to get it out there. I know you guys did a phenomenal job. So
yeah, and his edits, they kept coming back stronger and stronger. Because we went through multiple passes. I think we did kind of 2 developmental passes and 2 copy editing passes.
oh wow.
And well, like some were like big ones and some were like small ones, but 4 about ish in full. And every time, when he would add to the story, it would just get richer and deeper and more layers. And you could just see this, like, the soul that had been there just kind of flourishing. It was really, yeah. I mean, that's the kick that I get out of the process, is kind of seeing the writer come into their own.
Jack Cooper asks, when does Mike's book hit the market? That's actually a great question. We are currently in the middle of having it formatted and getting the cover done and everything. So I anticipate that we're going to have it out in the second quarter of 2023. That's a great question. Thanks, Jack.
Can I ask a question?
By the way, if you're watching, yeah, of course you can. Yeah.
Just about how the cover design process, and if you have, like a set of cover designers you go to, or what does that look like?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So when we first started Running Wild, we kind of played around with different cover designs, and then I found a cover designer who, his name's Amir, and he really brings like really professional and grade A covers. So what we do with Amir is I go to either myself or the editor, or maybe one of our product managers will go to the author and ask, okay, like, in your head, what do you feel like the looks like, right? Do you have any inspiration associated with it? And typically most authors have at least one, if not multiple, ideas of what the cover might look like. We then that along with the back jacket summary of the cover, so that Amir gets a feel for the story itself. And then he takes that and he comes back usually with at least 2 to 3 different versions. We then take those, go to the author, and just ask, like, do you have a preference in terms of in one versus another? Typically, actually, most authors, I mean, his work is so stunning. Like, most authors are like, I'd be happy with any of them. Some have some tweaks that they'd like to see to it. And then we just take it from there in terms of like back jacket copy and all that. I have an online tool that I leverage in order to do like the formatting, meaning like the size and shape of the cover itself, so that when we send it to our manufacturer, then it's much easier, if that makes sense. So now, one thing that I usually ask, sometimes I usually ask authors, like, okay, once you've signed off, because we have so many things that are going on at this in one time, and sometimes we have authors who are like, oh, but I really like a little bit of this. Oh, but I really want that. And although in and of itself it may not be a lot of work, but within the context of all the other stuff that we have going on, It's actually a ton of work. So we typically ask that, like, if there's feedback associated with the cover, or even with the interior, just to give us in one bucket, and then we'll work with the formatter or cover designer in making those adjustments. So it sounds so easy, doesn't it? So anyway, so yeah, that's basically it. We've had instances in the past where someone asked if they could design their own cover, and at least I feel like the work that we get from Amir, and so he runs Pulp Studios is the name of the cover design company, and I feel like the look and feel of Pulp Studios has basically it pretty much epitomizes both Rise and Running Wild. So I don't really like straying away from that, because honestly, people look for it at this juncture. They're looking for that unique, that slightly unique look and feel. So
I would also think that the author is too close to the book to give the cover justice, kind of thing, because they see what they see, but an outside set of eyes sees a whole picture and gets get a better image or better idea of what the cover could look like that would catch other people's attention and draw them to pick it off of the shelf.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we have had a few instances when someone came forward with like a hand drawing and wanted that to become like the cover and like spread everywhere. And although conceptually speaking, I get it. Like, don't get me wrong, I understand the desire. Unfortunately, it wasn't of the same level of quality that you would see in a bookstore. And I don't think the author, intended that. I really think it just intended to be a starting point for us in our efforts of designing the cover. But Peter's right. Like, that is something to keep in mind. We're lucky enough to have an amazing cover designer who works with us and has worked regularly with us for 4 years now. So, just keep that in mind, that his look and feel, his style has really come to represent what we do. So, and it's not crap. Unlike if I was doing it. So awesome. Okay, so if you are watching and you just recently joined, you are here with myself, Peter Wright, and Cody Cisco, and we are some of the editors from Running Wild and RIZE Press, and we are here with you on Thursdays and 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern time, to basically answer whatever questions you may have. It could be around publishing, it could be around the craft of writing, it could be around marketing. It could be, actually, you can ask us whatever you want. It doesn't mean we'll answer it. It just means that you can ask it. So, actually, with that, Peter and I, earlier today, we attended, I guess I led, we have an advisory board. So we are really, really blessed in that we have some absolutely amazing individuals who are on our advisory board, including the former president of Quirk Books, the former chief creative officer for IDW Publishing, a New York Times bestselling author and producer, as well as an amazing SVP who's basically going to be giving Disney a run for their money. No joke. I completely believe that. And these guys have all been around for a bit, and they are kind enough to advise us every 3-4 months. And, we basically give them a debrief of how we're doing in terms of sales, marketing, you name it. And then they come back and actually, it's funny because when we switched distributors, I'd say this time last year, And when I told them that we were thinking of switching distributors because they had a much bigger footprint than our previous distributor, and they actually provided a sales force so that the sales force would go forward to all of the different retailers and libraries and so on and pitch, your books on your behalf. One of our advisors was like, get ready because it's going to be a wild ride for about 9 months. So it turned out he had done almost the exact same thing. And it is so bumpy because there are all these things that like you just can't anticipate that come up during that process. And let's just say for my day job, I know better. Like I should have known that what was gonna occur, but anyway, at the end of the day, we actually have ended up having a much bigger footprint. Our sales have increased dramatically, and really our challenge now has been in getting our paperbacks into the bookstores, because I think it's a combination of COVID. There have been so many challenges with distribution associated with COVID, and with even just getting supplies in order to make those books, that when I go in and I look at our list, so I get a list that's updated daily of our back orders. And at one point when I was looking at our list of back orders, it had something insane like 700 books on back out order. And I thought, how is this possible? We're a small press. Like, that doesn't make any sense. And then the more I finally was able to get on a call with some of the individuals from our distribution company, I found out that there was a disconnect between the supply chain group and the manufacturing group. So we're resolving that now. So hopefully, if you are a fan and there's a book out there that you really want, and you went on, hopefully you went on like bookshop.org, and not necessarily Amazon, but let's say you went online to pick up that book and it's showing as unavailable or on back order. Hopefully you will see that change soon. So, and that again, it's like, it's another learning experience, I guess you could say, as part of this whole thing. So, Amy Bernstein says, really appreciate that you take time to do these sessions. As an author, I appreciate a degree of transparency from a publisher, a peek under the hood. Wow, thanks, Amy. It's funny. We had, I want to say 3 weeks ago, something like that, I had a meeting with my authors, because the way our new distributor reports out on sales is so dramatically different than the way our previous distributor reported out on sales, that I'm like, these guys have to be confused. And so we basically sat down and had a debrief with them regarding like, what do the reports mean, and are they helpful, all that kind of thing. And what was interesting is Amy, actually one of our authors made the same comment you did. He has another publisher that he works with, and all they do is twice a year they come out with royalty checks, but they don't actually tell him what the sales are like, and they don't tell him where the sales are occurring. And I think that's a sin, because how do we help each other, right? Like, we need to make sure that you understand how sales are going, where they're going well, and so on. And we need to understand that as well, so that we can best support the sales. And you can't do that unless you've got the data. So thank you. That's good to know. All right. So if anybody has any questions, please go ahead. Feel free. Pop them in the comments section of our chat, and we are more than happy to respond to them. I don't know, Peter or Cody, if there's anything that you guys want to cover. Not to put you on the spot, but I just did.
Well, one of the things I liked about the board meeting today that I attended, thank you for inviting me, was the advice that they gave. Is always the best advice to me is always so simple. It's stuff like, I could have thought of that, but we didn't. And then talking to these the people who are on the board, it just makes so much sense because you're seeing into their experience. You're seeing where they went wrong and how to bypass those issues, how to make your newsletter really pop. It's not more information, it's less information that's easy to digest and links into your website. So get them to the website, get them interested in the books, because that's why we're a press, right? I just thought that was really fascinating to hear and be a part of.
And I love the insight of, just ask some like famous schmo to come in and do an interview, right? Because
Right.
people are they'll open it to see who this male or female is who's interviewing this up and coming author. And I was like, that's such common sense. Of course, right? Of course that's a great idea. So Cremo says, hey Lisa, great pleasure to see you and follow you and your guests. Hey Cree, awesome to see you as well. Thank you for joining us. As always, it's a pleasure. And by the way, guys, next week I am actually going to be at San Diego's Comic Fest. I'll be at a table with one of our authors, actually, Tone Milazzo. I'm going to have a whole bunch of books with me, and I'll have a whole lot of fun stuff with me as well. So definitely come if you're in the San Diego area. Check it out. We'll have a blast just hanging out and saying hi. So.
You're doing a couple shows coming up, aren't you?
Oh yeah, I'm doing that. I'm also going to be doing the Atlanta Writers Conference. I'm actually in the middle of reviewing. So authors who attend the Atlanta Writers Conference, you actually get a chance to submit a synopsis and the first 20 pages of your work. And then either myself or I think there's like maybe 9 or 10 others who go through, review the work, and then we'll sit down with you one-on-one and give you the feedback. So what's great about it is Atlanta Writers Conference goes out of their way to find publishers and to find editors so that, this isn't just, like an instructor, someone who's gotten an MFA, who's looking at it and saying, oh yeah, this is great, or no, it's not. This is someone who actually could have an impact on your piece actually getting published. So it's actually, it looks to be a nice, meaty conference. I definitely recommend checking it out. In terms of getting feedback on your work this year, I think that might be done because I got my submissions a while ago. I think they max them at per person, meaning per instructor at 10. So it's worth checking it out and just seeing. And then the other one that I'll be at is the Pen Writers Conference, and that's in like mid-ish May, I think like May 14th. And that is in the Lancaster, Pennsylvania area. So my old-ish stomping grounds. I'm not from Lancaster, but it's always fun to hang out in Lancaster. And so I am actually going to be teaching a couple of classes at that conference. And if anybody has any conferences that you would love us to talk to or attend or even do like a Zoom, just let us know. Like, we are more than happy to help. I mean, this whole StreamYard thing, this is all about us all helping one another. It's not about us sitting here and looking fancy. So, yeah. And Peter, you in the last 2 months, you actually did an event, right?
I went up to Alma College in Michigan in January to give a talk on being an acquisitions editor for a small press, as well as being on a panel of what it's like to accept stories and work on them and get them published for the beginning or the second semester of classes for the MFA program up there. Sophronia's got a fantastic author and director. She's running the program. She brought it up. She actually started it. Was asked to start it actually, but it's a fantastic program, and it was a really great opportunity to really spread the word about Running Wild Press, about some of the books that we've published, about what we've got coming down the pike.
Awesome.
Really valuable to go there to be a part of get to speak, get to talk to the students, because it was cool. Because I'm looking back through time, like I don't know that I was these students 10 years ago, and I'm seeing them from the point where it's like when I was listening to editors when I was a student, it's like, oh my God, they know everything. Like, well, no, we don't. We've been practicing for a long time. It's just really neat seeing the vigor and the excitement in their faces and in their words, and to see where they could possibly go or what they could possibly accomplish based on what they're learning. It's really neat. Just something that struck me a little bit aside.
That's awesome. And I know Cody, so Cody's one of our editors, and I don't know if you want to talk about that experience, but it would also be fabulous if you talked about WeHo Reads, because that is such, at least in my mind, it's such a huge series in the Hollywood area. So
yeah, and Running Wild had a huge impact on Bookswell's ability to kind of survive its very early startup phase. I think you were one of our big sponsors in the year before the pandemic, or maybe it was the year of the pandemic. So that was really beneficial. And that's kind of where I got started producing the online events. And then this year, the city of West Hollywood put out a request for proposals, and I put together a year-long series of online events focused on the idea of creativity and healing and joy in times of crisis and despair. And so there have been, I think, 4 thus far, including we had an event that was themed around Black History Month and Women's History Month. And then this most latest one was actually hosted by the City of West Hollywood Poet Laureate, Brian Sonia Wallace, and it was Trans Future Poetics. So it was both poets and novelists who are transgender writing about the future and science fiction, and it's really beautiful. And it's been, over time I've sort of fine-tuned how we do online events, because it's so awkward when we're all kind of in these boxes and not together. But it's been a fun ride, and our next one I think is May 4th on the theme of sort of trans border migration and like languages and fiction from homelands and from new lands, which is going to be really great.
Yeah, that's awesome. And the last one was fabulous, just so you know. I had the pleasure of attending that one as well.
I'm glad you came. Yeah. And it's it's great to see. From my perspective, the reason I do this is that writers need more platforms for getting their voices out there. And one of the most powerful things a writer can do if their book is coming out is to find places where they can go and show up in front of their readers. And it's been a mixed bag with the pandemic having to do all this virtual, but it does open up a lot of possibilities. You can do a lot in your hometown. You can do a lot if you go traveling around, but you can also do a lot from your home.
Yeah, very true. I mean, it's been bizarre in that we've been able to connect with individuals in spaces that previously we may not have ever thought to connect with. But on the flip side of that coin, we're not actually physically with one another. So when we actually do have an opportunity to sit down with someone who is physically right next to us, it's like,
yeah.
Oh my goodness, I can actually touch someone.
It's like breathing different air. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Jack Cooper asks, do your individual editors specialize in particular genres? I don't know. Do you guys want to take that, or?
I think we have preferences of the genres that we're comfortable working in. Does that limit us to what we actually choose? Not always. It's the power of the language of the work, whether it appeals to us, whether it makes sense to us to be a part of this. Because if it doesn't make sense, if I'm not interested in it, if I'm not passionate about it, I'm not going to do a great job. And if Cody's passionate about it, please, by all means, you take it, because you're going to do a much better job on it than I can.
Right.
So it's really so based on preference about what connects, what you can connect with, rather.
Peter, you do more like literary fiction, right?
Yeah, that's where I tend to find my niche.
Yeah, I'm more of the like genre guy, mainly speculative fiction. But funny enough, like the books that I'm doing for Running Wild tend to also be historical fiction.
Really?
Rebecca and Mike's are both set, quite a bit in the past. Which I hadn't actually made that connection until right now, because that's not how I thought of them. I thought of them more as like LGBT books, but they are actually historical fiction too.
Yeah, like speculative fiction, I wouldn't. Sorry, go ahead, Lise.
I was just going to say, I think we get a lot of historical fiction. I just, when you said that, I just realized that. So I'm sorry, Peter. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, in terms of genres that I might be interested in, speculative fiction is not one of them, because that writing is fantastic when it's done well, when it's really well edited and everything. It's fantastic, but I just can't see it. I can't get it to where it really needs to go. So if someone like Cody really gets that, is into it, more power to you, because I want to see the finished product, but I'm not the one to edit it.
It's interesting to think about like the editor's role as seeing, where the story can go and helping it get there. And if you can't see where it should go, then it's like not the book for you to help with. I like that perspective.
That was another thing that was interesting.
And I was just gonna say, we go out of our way to, like, I won't give Peter a sci-fi piece, and I won't give Cody. Well, I might pass a literary one by Cody, but like usually it has more of a commercial flair to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think we do have a sense of what style each of our editors is interested in, because in reality, we want the editor to come in and be passionate about working on this piece, right? Even if all they do is sit down, review it, in essence, do like a light line edit and come back and say, you could think about doing this, but you don't have to, right? We have our feedback runs the gamut from, just like high level questions regarding the narrative and the characterization and the craft itself, to more detailed feedback of, this may be more effective if you consider doing X, Y, and Z, and both work, right? It depends on a piece. It depends on the editor's relationship to the author, and the author's relationship to the editor, and how they're gelling to make that the best story that it possibly can be. So, I'm sorry, Peter, go ahead.
Oh, I was just, I'm fine. I forget what I was going to say.
Sorry.
Oh no, I can't remember. The neat thing about the round robin we did the other day for the submission of the slush pile is we got to see through other people's eyes. I knew that one of the editors would like this story, even though it wasn't my type of story. I like the quality, I believe in it, but it's not something that I would do. But that's something that I would feel really do justice for. So when I hear somebody else say they're interested in it, it's like, okay, well that makes total sense. And getting to know what the other editor's preferences are and likes and dislikes, it's really valuable.
And interesting to me that we actually have authors come in who explicitly request specific editors. So like they read a book or multiple books that you've edited, or that you had a take in, and then came back and said, you know what, I want to work with Peter, I want to work with Cody, and I think that's amazing, right? That speaks really, really well to your skills, obviously, right? And to what we're all bringing forward into the broader world. So And in all honesty, we also have a little cheat sheet of like what editors like what kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Which, mind you, they know that we have it, right? This isn't like a shock. And the acquisition editors and myself will go through it and figure out from that, like, okay, does this make sense to go to Rebecca? Does this make sense to go to Cody? Does this make sense to, go to Ben? And then we'll first ping those editors that we think would be most likely to not only want to work on it, but to really like have the piece thrive. And then from there, a lot of times we'll sit down and chat, like myself, Peter, and Ben, and talk through like, okay, so if this person's not available, then who else might be available that would really do it more than justice, right? Like really make it thrive. So, so Jack, I hope that answered your question. Great question, by the way. Cool. Well, we are at 5:41, and you are with another Run Wild with Us. Ask us anything. You are here with myself. Jack gave us a thumbs up.
Yeah, thanks,
you are
Jack.
here with myself, Peter Wright, who's one of our both editors and acquisition editors, and Cody Cisco, one of our editors. And I actually, just so you guys know, I actually invite all of our editors to this session, and they join whenever they can. So you have an opportunity by attending this to actually meet or interface with a variety of our editors. So like last time, well, not last time, but the time before, it was me, Peter, and Henry Hertz. This time it's me, Peter, and Cody. So who knows? I mean, you could have actually all of our editors may show up at some point. So it's a great opportunity for you if you're an aspiring editor, if you're an aspiring author, actually, if you're an aspiring editor, and you want some insights into how we do stuff. And I do want to make it clear, like, this is how we do stuff. That doesn't necessarily mean that, like, if you go to Penguin or St. Martin, it's not, it won't be this intimate. I would be very surprised if it was this intimate, if you got so much personalization. And it'll be very different depending on the different small presses or independent presses that you interact with, or even or the mid-sized presses. So just be aware of that. Like I said, everyone's a little bit different in how they do things. So cool.
It's a wild and complex industry. It's really, everyone, it's especially those smaller presses that aren't, the Random House, Penguin, all Simon and Schuster. They're fitting into a model that's designed for the big ones, and they're trying to figure out how we, use some of the same tools to get books out there. But yeah, it's a challenge.
And there's so many tools out there. I mean, one of the feedback that we got, or the suggestions that we received during our advisory board meeting, was to do a Kickstarter, like an anthology, and bring on someone who's of note to be the editor for the overarching piece, which is a great idea. Like I'm totally down. But to your point, Cody, like that's a completely different model, right, than what we've been doing to date. And in and of itself is, the individual who actually sets it up and puts everything in place, that's a lot of work, so they have to have serious buy-in to make sure that it's going to be successful. So, and then there's that guy, what is 34 million or something like that. It's up to some insane amount of money, but anyway.
Yeah. I was wondering, maybe you want to talk about like the difference between, like a novel, memoir, or an anthology, and what are the different challenges?
Sure. So a novel typically has one overarching narrative, and then it has a lot of sub narratives within the piece. So if you're listening to this and you're like, what the hell is she talking about? What that means is a narrative is a story, right? So there's Jane jumped over the moon, right? And then there'll be sub stories within it. So like, Jane's best friend told her to kiss off, and then she jumped over the moon. And then you have everything that occurs as a result of that exchange, I guess you could say. Typically in a novel, you're going to have multiple smaller narratives associated with that story. A novella, on the other hand, is typically between 15,000 and 40,000 words, I believe. That one varies a little bit. Sometimes like 45,000. That also has Jane jumped over the moon. And it also has, her friend told her to kiss off. But it'll only have like one or two her friend told her to kiss off. It's not going to have 3, 4, 5, right? There's not a whole lot of sub stories that are going on. There's not as many sub interactions that are occurring within that storyline, within that plot. A short story is typically between, well, this one's arguable. Usually it's somewhere between like 5 and 15,000, something like that. Although you could argue like 2,500 to 15,000. That's a pretty wide range. So that one is also going to have Jane jumped over the moon, but then you're not going to necessarily find out what transpired after Jane jumped over the moon. And you're not going to have necessarily all of these sub conversations or sub challenges that are occurring within that narrative itself. Now, what some authors have done who are brilliant at story writing, but maybe they're not as comfortable writing novellas or writing novels, is they'll actually write a series of short stories with the same characters in similar environments, where like one short story picks up where the other short story left off, as a way of as a way of connecting all the short stories together. There's no way that is necessary. Like, you don't have to do that, right? So that individual's doing that as a part of the art form itself. It does not mean that, you now have to connect all of your short stories together into one overarching piece. But when it's done well, it's done beautifully. And then, what is it? Macros? When it's less than 1,000?
Yeah, macros, flash, and
flash.
Micro.
Yep. Macro, flash, and micro. Those are small stories that oftentimes fit on a page or a paragraph. Sometimes they'll fit maybe 2 pages, because it might be 500 words, because a double-spaced page is typically 250 words. I'm broad generalizing here, guys. So just be aware that you still need to check when you are writing what your actual word count is. So, but typically speaking, it's around 250 words per page, double-spaced. And those tend to be Jane jumped over the moon. So you're not going to get all the side stuff. You're not
right.
A brilliant writer is going to have Jane jump over the moon, but you're going to get a sense of Jane's anxiety. You're going to get a sense of Jane's hostility, why Jane jumped over the moon. Like, all this will be implied within the piece itself, and which is something that's amazing about flash fiction and microfiction when it's done, really, really well. It's just breathtaking. Now, from a market perspective, for whatever reason, us human beings, we prefer more novel length pieces. And that could be novel length in terms of, it could be an audiobook, it could be an ebook, it could be a paperback, it could be a hardback. But for whatever reason, we like having all of those layers and complexities associated with that overarching narrative that is the core of whatever that novel is. We also like nonfiction. Again, though, it depends on your purpose for reading that nonfiction. Whether it's because you want to be entertained, and in that case, it might be more of a memoir, or it may be something that, like a famous person wrote and it's, humorous or whatever the case may be. Or it may be a nonfiction work that's more of a study of, a specific area. So that's completely up to you as the reader. But as a writer, it's good to be aware of this, because I think a lot of us, we read novels without realizing how complicated they are because of all the additional narrative threads that exist within the story itself. And so we'll go from writing a short story and then jump right into writing a novel, which isn't wrong. It's just, be aware that you're probably going to encounter a lot of challenges associated with it that you had not anticipated. So
there's also a lot of freedom, because you can meander and you can win different ways with different storylines. I always looked at like short stories, macros, micros, and flash as kind of like a moment, just one thing happening, why it happened, and then it happens. And the longer short stories and novellas is like something happened, but we get to find out more details about it. Why? What was the precursor? What was the backstory? What happened? And what was the denouement, the ending of it? And novels is just like wide open. However you want to attack the story, however you want to look at it, you just got the room and the breadth to do that. I just think it's really interesting.
And it has a couple unique pitfalls, I think, the novel, in that it takes so long to write, and it's so much fun to introduce all those new threads. But often, I'll see, working with newer authors, it'll be a new thread will come onto the scene, but then it won't get reused. It won't get picked up again. It'll kind of get dropped. And then you're like, well, what was that about? Like, is that important to the story you want to tell? If so, like, let's carry it through. Or if it's not important, then maybe like it's removing that thread and then times 10 or however many, that were introduced.
I think the author sometimes just forgets the storyline and just kind of barrels forward. And by the end of the book, they forgot about it. It's not necessary. And please go back and read your writing for a second or third draft. But sometimes they just leave the storyline as is, and it just kind of tapers off. Yeah,
if you go like chapter by chapter, you might forget what you did 3 chapters ago, and that that there's something really great that you could pull into it, but it's just slipped.
I do think it's interesting. The book I'm editing now, in the third chapter, one of the main characters is driving a van, and by the middle of the book, he's driving a pickup truck.
Magic.
It was a van on page 47. So you got to pick up stuff like that too. That's one of the things why editing is so important.
Lisa, something you said, I mean, it's so true. The way that we can read a novel and it seems so easy, which is not my experience on the flip side of that about writing it.
No, it's true. Like, I still remember the first book I wrote. I was finishing college, and I asked my sister-in-law at the time if she would be willing to read it. And the poor woman was so kind and said she would love to. Oh my gosh. So Cody and Peter, it started off as more like literary. It somehow became like a mystery something. And then it became like, I want to say horror. And then later on, it went back to being kind of literary. Then it had like a magical realism element to it. I don't know how she finished this thing.
I'm a fan of genre blending. I'll be on the record as that, but maybe there's some other specific pitfalls with that.
I too am a big fan of genre bending. I think it was just like my brain going, I'm bored with this, so now I'm gonna make it this.
Yeah. I think that can be like one of the things that writers need from editors is reconnecting to the story. We're coming into it. This isn't our story. We're helping. We're this ancillary role, but we're helping them kind of reconnect to what they had gone through as they were writing it and what their vision was for completing it.
Yeah,
Which, because
absolutely.
it's complicated, that outside help can be really useful.
Or if it's evolved, right? Like a lot of
Yes.
times the author, while they're in the midst of doing the initial draft, they suddenly realize things about the characters and about the storyline that they had not occurred to them previously, and they don't think to go back and connect all of those dots, like bring those threads together. So to both of your points, I mean, it really makes the role of the editor critical. So I'd love to know who can do that without help.
Brilliant writers. I mean, 1 in a million, right?
Clearly.
But then, I mean, you see some successful writers and you kind of see the page count go up, and it looks like maybe as they got more successful, they became less, won't say reliant, but less dependent on their editors. And maybe someone could have gone in. I'm thinking of Murakami or a Stephen King, who just, the books just get bigger and bigger and bigger.
That's true. I mean, and then that's not a bad thing, right? I mean, as long as it's consistent and
you can sustain. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. I mean, and we've all seen well-known authors who it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and you were like, I don't know how to follow this. Like, so that's a different, yeah. No one really wants to be there. And typically what that usually means is that the editor was afraid to give, either the editor was afraid to give the feedback, right? Or the author received it and said, no, I'm fine. Like, it's good. I don't hear the latter very often, to be honest. I hear more, and maybe it's just because I'm talking more to authors, like, well-established authors. But I hear more of that the editor just, backed off. How about you guys?
That's why I don't read who the author of the story is when I first start editing a book. I don't want to know if he's a college professor or a PhD or, a junkie on the street. It's all about the writing for me. It's very simple. That being said, I've had experience with some authors who weren't open to being edited, as it were, and they would change what they would actually rewrite passages between drafts. It would really throw me off a cliff, but they just didn't listen. I mean, they thought that their vision was right, and I'm like, but all I'm trying to do is add stuff to make it grow, and make it bigger, and make it more rounded, more colorful, like Cody was saying. And he's like, no, it's going to be like this. I'm like, okay, well then your story is just going to be what it is, because I can't fix what you won't let me fix, what he won't let me fix.
Yeah, like a breakdown in the process or the relationship isn't going to serve the work.
Right.
Editors and writers should be adding to each other's understanding of what comes next in the revision process.
Fortunately, it doesn't happen often.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of places, maybe don't have the flexibility or put in the care to make the right match. It's, it's hard. It's not on paper. You're like, okay, maybe this person would be interested in editing this. Maybe the author would want to work with that person, but it's tricky and complicated, because there are relationships involved and skills and all sorts of stuff. It's a little bit of, when it works, it's like magic. But,
right. That's true.
One of the good things about a small press is we're able to take more time. We're not especially deadline driven, so we can spend more time with an author and make it that much better, as opposed to big houses. They got deadlines and everything. So
yeah,
a lot of positives to small press too.
Yeah. They have, they're answering to large departments, and it's all of those working together, and it's all funneling up to like the business units, and there's no flexibility in that system, I think.
Right.
Yeah. That's true. I mean, as far as I'm aware, based on my conversations with various editors. So, well, with that, I want to thank everybody who joined us. Thank you for joining another Run Wild with Us, Ask Us Anything. I want to thank Peter and Cody for being absolutely amazing on this live stream. If you were joining this and you missed it, go ahead. Actually, feel free. Put your questions or comments in the comments section, because we actually do go back and check, and we're more than happy to respond to anything that you come forward with. And don't forget to join us next week for another Run Wild with Us, Ask Us Anything. Talk to you soon. Bye.